The fluorescent lights in the courthouse hallway buzzed overhead like angry wasps, casting harsh shadows across my trembling hands. I could taste the metallic fear on my tongue as I sat on that cold wooden bench, my worn purse clutched against my chest like armor that had already failed me. The marble floors echoed with the click of expensive shoes, his lawyer's shoes, while I sat there in my secondhand dress, feeling like I was drowning in a system designed for people who could afford to breathe. This wasn't how I imagined my life would unfold when I was young and believed in fairy tales. Back then, I thought love meant protection, not destruction. I thought marriage meant partnership, not ownership. But here I was, 38 years old, sitting outside family court in downtown Chicago, waiting for a judge to decide if I deserved to keep the one thing that mattered more than my own heartbeat, my daughter. The courthouse smelled of old wood and broken dreams. Every person who walked past seemed to know something I didn't, seemed to belong in a way I never would. My ex-husband's voice still rang in my ears from our last encounter. "You're nothing without me. You'll never be anything." Those words had carved themselves into my soul like scars that refused to heal. But today, everything would change. Today, my 15-year-old daughter would speak her truth, and the world would finally hear what I'd been too broken to say. 6 months ago, I was still living in that suffocating house on Maple Street, where every creak of the floorboards felt like an accusation and every shadow held the memory of his rage. I had become a ghost of myself, moving through rooms like I was apologizing for existing. My daughter Emma would find me some mornings, staring at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, wondering when I had become so small. "Mom, you're stronger than you think," she would whisper, her young hands touching my shoulders with a gentleness that broke my heart. How had my child become the parent? How had I let her carry the weight of my fears? The decision to leave came on a Tuesday. He had thrown a plate across the kitchen, and it shattered against the wall where Emma's school photo hung. The glass cut through her smiling face, and something inside me finally snapped. Not because of what he did to me, I had endured that for years, but because he had touched her world, her innocence, her sense of safety. That night, while he slept off another whiskey-fueled rage, I packed our lives into 2 suitcases. Emma helped me, her movements quick and silent, like we were escaping a burning building. And we were. We were fleeing from the flames of a love that had turned toxic, from the smoke of promises that had become threats. The women's shelter on the south side became our sanctuary. The walls were thin, and you could hear other women crying through the night, but for the first time in years, I could breathe without permission. Emma and I shared a single bed, and she would hold my hand in the darkness, whispering stories about the future she imagined for us. "We're going to have a little apartment with yellow walls," she would say, "and we'll plant flowers in window boxes, and no one will ever make you cry again." But he found us. He always found us. And that's when the real battle began. The custody papers arrived on a Thursday morning, delivered by a man in a cheap suit who couldn't look me in the eye. My hands shook as I read the legal language that felt like a foreign tongue, but the message was clear. He wanted Emma, not because he loved her, but because he knew losing her would destroy me completely. "He's claiming I'm an unfit mother," I told Sarah, my court-appointed advocate, my voice barely above a whisper. "He says I'm mentally unstable, that I abandoned our home, that I'm filling Emma's head with lies." Sarah's eyes were kind but realistic. "He has resources, Jennifer. A good lawyer, a stable address, a clean record. The court doesn't see the bruises that have healed or hear the words that left no visible scars." That night, Emma found me crying in the shelter's common room, surrounded by crumpled tissues and legal documents that felt like weapons pointed at my heart. She was supposed to be doing homework, but instead, she sat beside me and began reading through the papers with a maturity that no 15-year-old should possess. "Mom, this is all lies," she said, her voice steady and sure. "Every single word, and I'm going to tell them. Emma, sweetheart, it's complicated." The court might not know her interruption was firm, her jaw set with a determination I recognized from my own mother. "I've been quiet for too long. I've watched him hurt you, and I've said nothing because I was scared. But I'm not scared anymore." She pulled out her phone and showed me something that made my breath catch. Videos, recordings, Pictures of bruises I thought no one had seen. Evidence I never knew she had been collecting. I've been documenting everything for 2 years, Mom. Every threat, every time he hurt you, every time you tried to hide it from me. I was waiting for the right moment. The right moment had arrived, and my daughter, my beautiful, brave daughter, was ready to fight for us both. The weeks leading up to the custody hearing were a battlefield of emotions I couldn't control. Some days, I felt like a warrior ready to claim my freedom. Other days, I felt like that broken woman who had believed his words when he called me worthless, useless, a failure as a mother and a wife. What if they believe him? I asked Emma one evening as we sat in our tiny shared room. What if they look at me and see what he sees, someone who isn't strong enough, smart enough, good enough? Emma turned from her homework, her eyes blazing with an intensity that reminded me of my own mother when she used to defend me against playground bullies. Mom, do you know what I see when I look at you? I shook my head, afraid of the answer. I see the woman who worked 2 jobs to pay for my violin lessons. I see the woman who stayed up all night when I had pneumonia, even though he yelled at you for babying me. I see the woman who taught me that love doesn't hurt, even when you were living with someone who hurt you every day. Her words hit me like a revelation. I had been so focused on my failures, my weaknesses, my inability to leave sooner, that I had forgotten my strengths. I had forgotten that love, real love, was what I had given her every single day, even in the darkest moments. I'm scared, Emma, I admitted, the words feeling like a confession. I know, Mom, but scared doesn't mean weak. Scared means you have something worth fighting for. That night, I looked at myself in the mirror differently. I saw the woman who had survived. I saw the mother who had protected her daughter's heart even when her own was breaking. I saw someone who deserved better than the lies he had fed me about my worth. The hearing was in 3 days, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt ready to face him. The morning of the custody hearing, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror in our shelter room, trying to steady my hands enough to apply lipstick. The woman staring back at me looked fragile, but there was something new in her eyes, a flicker of the person I used to be before he convinced me I was nothing. Emma appeared behind me, straightening my collar with the care of a mother preparing her child for the first day of school. You look beautiful, Mom. You look like yourself again. The courthouse steps felt like climbing a mountain. Each step brought me closer to a confrontation I had been avoiding for 15 years. My ex-husband stood near the entrance with his lawyer, a man in a $1,000 suit who probably charged more per hour than I made in a week. When our eyes met, his smile was cold and calculated. Jennifer, he said, his voice carrying that familiar tone of condescension. I hope you've come to your senses. This doesn't have to be difficult. Just admit you can't provide for Emma the way I can, and we can settle this quietly. No, I said, the word coming out stronger than I felt. We're going to court. His lawyer leaned in and whispered something that made him laugh, a sound that used to make me flinch. You're making a mistake, he said. I have witnesses who will testify about your mental state, your inability to maintain employment, your history of instability. What do you have? Before I could answer, Emma stepped forward. She had been quiet during our walk to the courthouse, but now she looked at her father with eyes that held no fear, only disappointment. She has the truth, Emma said simply, and she has me. Something flickered across his face, surprise, maybe even concern. He had always been able to control me with intimidation, but Emma was different. She was stronger than I had been at her age, stronger than I had been even yesterday. Inside the courtroom, the wooden pews felt like church pews, and in a way, this was a kind of worship, a prayer for justice, for truth, for the chance to rebuild our lives without his shadow hanging over us. The judge entered, and my heart began to race. This was it. This was our moment. Judge Martinez was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. She looked at both sides with the measured gaze of someone who had seen too many broken families and knew the weight of the decisions she made. This is a custody hearing for Emma Catherine Morrison, age 15, she began, her voice echoing in the wood-paneled room. I'll hear from both parents and any witnesses they wish to call. His lawyer went first, painting a picture of me that felt like looking at a funhouse mirror, distorted, ugly, unrecognizable. They called me unstable, irresponsible, a woman who had abandoned her family home and was now living in a shelter, unable to provide basic necessities for her child. Your Honor, his lawyer said, his voice smooth as silk, Mr. Morrison is simply trying to protect his daughter from a mother who has demonstrated a pattern of erratic behavior and poor judgment. Then it was his turn to speak. He stood up, straightened his tie, and looked directly at me with those eyes that had once made me feel loved and now only made me feel small. Your Honor, I've tried to be patient with Jennifer's issues, but she's clearly not capable of caring for our daughter. She's worthless as a mother, worthless as a provider. Emma deserves better than objection. My lawyer stood up, but before she could continue, something extraordinary happened. Emma rose from her seat in the gallery. Her movement was so sudden, so unexpected, that the entire courtroom fell silent. Even the court reporter stopped typing. Your Honor, Emma said, her voice clear and strong. May I speak? Judge Martinez looked surprised but nodded. You may approach the bench. Emma walked to the front of the courtroom with her back straight and her head held high. When she turned to face the room, I saw my mother in her stance, my grandmother in her courage, and something entirely her own in her determination. Your Honor, my father just called my mother worthless, Emma began, her voice carrying to every corner of the silent room. But I need you to know something. She's not worthless. She's my hero. The words hung in the air like a prayer. I felt tears streaming down my face, but for the first time in years, they weren't tears of pain. She's the woman who held me when I had nightmares about the yelling. She's the woman who worked double shifts so I could take violin lessons. She's the woman who taught me that love doesn't leave bruises. Even though she was living with someone who left them on her, Emma reached into her backpack and pulled out her phone. Your Honor, I have 2 years of evidence. Videos of him threatening her, photos of bruises he left, recordings of him calling her names that no one should ever hear. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming. My ex-husband's face had gone pale, and his lawyer was frantically whispering in his ear. She saved my life by leaving him, Emma continued, and now I'm going to save hers by telling the truth. Judge Martinez reviewed Emma's evidence for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. The videos were damning clear footage of verbal abuse, threats, moments of violence I thought no one had witnessed. My daughter had been my guardian angel, documenting the truth when I was too broken to see it clearly myself. When the judge finally spoke, her voice was firm and decisive. Based on the evidence presented, particularly the testimony and documentation provided by the minor child, I am granting full custody to the mother, Jennifer Morrison. Furthermore, I am issuing a restraining order against the father. The gavel came down like thunder, and suddenly I could breathe again. Really breathe. For the first time in 15 years. Emma ran to me, and we held each other in that courtroom while his lawyer gathered papers and my ex-husband sat in stunned silence. The man who had called me worthless just hours before now looked small and defeated, while his daughter, our daughter, had proven that love is the strongest force in any courtroom. How did you know to record everything? I asked Emma as we walked out into the Chicago sunshine. Because I knew someday you'd be ready to fight, she said, squeezing my hand, and I wanted to be ready to fight with you. 6 months later, we have that little apartment with yellow walls that Emma dreamed about. We planted flowers in window boxes, and true to her prediction, no one makes me cry anymore except Emma. When she plays violin and the music is so beautiful it moves me to tears of joy. I learned something in that courtroom. Worthless is not a truth about who you are. It's just a lie someone tells you when they're afraid of your power. And sometimes it takes the love of a child to remind you that you were never worthless at all. You were always a hero. You just needed someone brave enough to stand up and say it out loud. If this story touched your heart, if you've ever felt worthless but found your strength again, subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear it today. There are stories that change the way we see ourselves, and this is one of them.